Thanks a lot. So now we know who's in the room. We know how many, what kind of expectations do you have towards Bernardo? So he has to respond to all these aspects: urban development, civic activism, decision-making, journalism, marketing, communication, movements, municipalism, participation, urban justice, human rights, civic liberties, segregation, mobilization, participatory democracy, connecting people, community organizing, digital platforms, information technology, mobility and accessibility, civic parties, and of course the limits of digital technology. So good luck, Bernardo. It's going to be an interesting moment. But first of all, I would like to, well, thanks a lot for being here, and I would like to ask a little bit why participation is, civic participation and participatory decision making is at the core of the movement that you're also part of, and how did it unfold?
Well, first of all, thank you for inviting me. It's a nice pleasure to be in Budapest. I was for the first time in '97. I was almost a teenager with traveling in Europe, so it's very interesting to come back so many years after that. At the first, I asked Levente to change the digital participation approach and to speak about networked participation, to include the physical, the analogical, the offline. For me, it's a kind of hybrid participation always. It's not enough with the digital, it's not enough with the physical. So it's a kind of hybrid place where we participate. This presentation, I will go through fast some slides, but there are 3 moments of this participation. The 15M Indignados movement, grassroots self-organization, occupation of the squares, that was more or less the beginning of a new kind of participation, hybrid participation, digital one, collective action. The other one of the presentation is how people, after 2-3 years of grassroots and organizing without thinking about the representative politics, began to think, why don't we do something? Because politicians are not really helping. And the end of the presentation is, well, I actually work in MediaLab Prado. It's kind of citizen innovation place in Madrid, quite open and autonomous. It's from the City Hall. We work with the City Hall and this new platform, Decide Madrid, that the philosophy was born in the squares, so in the 15M. But it's completely different. When you're a government, you're not an activist, so it's not so easy. Things that you think are going to work as a government, it's a big city, it's the capital of Spain, you realize that it's not working because you are convoking people to do things, but you're a government. So these 3 moments, I think that are very present in this presentation. It's almost impossible to speak about participation in Spain if we don't remember where we come from. So it's a quite concrete moment of a place. This was the 15M movement, the occupation of the squares of the city, and how a small city was born in the heart of Madrid and Barcelona and many big cities, how there were a lot of grassroots movements, new commissions, and new kind of narratives, not speaking about left and right, but the bottom and above, so the people against the light, a lot of new digital tools, a new way of inhabiting the public space. So it was more or less a turning point of the Spain. Of course, it was very interesting how the hackers and the free software and the free culture people were very inside the square, very inside the central occupation of Puerta del Sol in Madrid. And everything with free tools and WordPress and free software, free servers. They thought that after taking the square, it was very interesting to take the neighborhood. So it was incentivated. How don't you take your neighborhood and you do a collective assembly, an horizontal one, and you use these digital tools, this new way of doing assemblies. And after the squares, it was the neighborhoods. And well, of course, I see there are a lot of people from urbanism, from city, for architects, and I think it was very important in Spain, this way of occupying a space, an empty space, and how to organize with an assembly, an open space for proposing theater and music. So another way of doing city, of living in a city. This right to the city was very important. And so somehow, I want to focus a little bit on this. Well, this is the Gezi Park of Turkey, the right icon. And this is the Propongo. Propongo, that tool, it was born in the square in Madrid. Several hackers, they realized it, that In all of the assemblies, there were a lot of proposals, but it was a kind of chaotic. So they invented a way, a bottom-up method for doing proposals, and the kind of, why don't you do proposals and we think how to do them? So it was very naive, very simple, a kind of a digital platform, free software, bottom-up mechanism, that after years of that, it became Decide Madrid, the official platform of the city. As a kind of interesting thing, the source, the free software of Propongo, there was a government of Brazil, of Rio Grande do Sul, Porto Alegre, that they took the software and they adapted. So it was quite interesting to see how a government in a place saw a thing made by hackers and activists and grassroots people and implemented somehow. So this was more or less the beginning of this participation, new way of doing things. I will go very fast on this, just to explain that these are graph. There are a lot of people taking data from Twitter and Facebook and doing these maps of the networks. So above you have the 4 or 5 political parties in Spain before the Indignados movement. So you see completely isolated communities without speaking between them. And this is more or less the graph of the main players in the Indignados initial explosion. Democracia Real Ya, Juventud Sin Futuro, La Paz, different actors that were inside. So you see different networks with more conversation, more transversal. So this is very interesting how the topology of the networks, when you occupy a public space in the city, when you create different ways of speaking, you create a different network. It's not a top-down, it's not a centralized network. So you create different topographies, more open, of course. I will now go to the way of participation and self-organization in this municipalist moment. 2 years after the Indignados, 2.5 years, a lot of people began to think of, okay, why don't we try to put this philosophy of neighborhoods and assemblies and people using digital tools, because everything was mixed in the kind of using pads, I will show after that. And this was the so-called municipalism, the first book of La Apuesta Municipalista. After the book, it was a book made in Madrid by Traficante de Sueño, Ada Colau, a very important leader that came from the housing, right to the housing movement. Well, somehow people began to think about what's municipalism and how to take back the cities. Take back the city in thinking about a citizen approach of why neoliberalism and why capitalism is taking the city from us. So from that approach of why we have less public space now than 30 years ago. So it was a kind of, by the practices of people occupying parks and doing things, and so the life of the cities in Spain changed it in the kind of, in 2 years, it was a kind of lively society with a lot of initiatives, a lot of things happening without politicians, or few help of politicians. And so this municipalist movement was trying to put the practice of, this is a work made by CEMOS, it's a collective from the south of Spain, the municipal recipes. So you have the 15M Platter, you have the housing movement combo platter, you have the resistance combo platter, feminism, right to the city, electoral combo platter. So municipalist movement is not just about representative politics. You see the last one, this is the electoral combo platter. But how these fields, how these resistance, like here you had a free culture, hackers, free software, open knowledge, free technology, feminism, how all of these combined created a way of trying to do a new kind of political organization. That is not a party, it could be a kind of party movement, networked movement, citizen-driven movement, political approach, party. So it was more or less the beginning. This is Ganemos Madrid, the more municipalist organization of the whole Spain. It was Ganemos, Let's Win, in Barcelona, Guanyem. So it was a kind of inside-outside. organization with a lot of commissions, with a lot of not really top-down organization, a kind of you could do many things. And so this new way of organizing was the core of the municipal movement. So this is a kind of very complex thing, but for example, for getting this coalition in Madrid called Ahora Madrid, you see how all of the actors were inside, from the 15M, more grassroots movements, squatters, social centers. Ganemos was more or less the core of the municipalist movement. All traditional left parties, Izquierda Unida, left, United Left, they went inside, but of course they had to change the way of speaking, of listening, it was difficult for them with a lot of men leaders speaking loud, and it was going, no, you have to raise hands and you have to wait, you have to speak, and you have to do it in a different way. There's a green party called Equo. It's more or less, I don't know where you see it. Well, so and Podemos, that is, it was a new party. It's not a new party anymore, but it was more a kind of new party thinking about the renewal of the left, but thinking about the state, not so much about territories. And they found it very interesting to be inside municipalist movement. So in Ahora Madrid, they went inside. Podemos, Ganemos, Izquierda, Equo, all of these movements. And more or less, it was the same in the whole Spain. Here we have a digital platform, a digital tool. It was very interesting to think how the program of the coalition of Ahora Madrid, on the one hand, it was a free software. The first coalition to do this platform was Zaragoza, a small city, well, a medium city in Spain. And as it was free software and the movement, the municipalist movement was connected, Madrid took the platform and adapted. So why do you have to build a new platform when you have a free software for building a political program? So all of the initiatives, municipalist ones, and it's really interesting because after that, a lot of cities of the planet took this platform. For example, I went to a city in Brazil, Belo Horizonte, and they asked me, how did they do in Madrid that? And in one telegram, I said, okay, do you have the source of this program? They had the document in 2 hours, and 2 days after that, they had a platform adapted for that Brazilian situation. So it was very interesting to see what was more important for people, the proposals, political proposals. And it was more or less the philosophy of Propongo, that digital tool that was made in the squares. And you could vote. I find very interesting the public health system, blah, 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 boom, you voted. So the program of the Ahora Madrid was built in that way. I will go fast about it, but I think it's interesting for you in the moment you are in Budapest with the local elections, how the campaign could work with all of these grassroots and territorial assemblies linked to Ganemos, to Ahora Madrid, to Guayem, to Barcelona en Comú, to the municipalist candidates. It was very important. It was a lot of people inside, but few money, very few money. So if you saw the budget that the traditional party had, they had, I don't know, maybe the Socialist Party in Madrid was a kind of 20 million for a campaign. And Ahora Madrid made a crowdfunding, 100,000. So it was a very big difference. So in those times, with a lot of illusion, with a lot of crazy things, people began to think outside the official campaign of Ahora Madrid, how to help. It was very interesting how using digital tools and different ways of participation, people did crazy things. There were 2 movements, the graphic liberation movement of Barcelona and the graphic liberation movement of Madrid, and another graphical and designers movement called Madrid con Manuela. Manuela is the name of the candidate. She is the mayor now. And they did a kind of, Manuela is a 72 years old woman. They found a picture of Manuela with 24, and they make a Tinder profile for the campaign. They made a lot of music and DJs, some music for the candidate. This is a lot of Telegram groups, Facebook, Twitter, a lot of campaigns, hashtag, SoundCloud. this 1 equal 10 is a kind of find 10 friends and explain why this candidate is much better than traditional ones. So do it drinking coffee, by Facebook, by email, phone, but 10 friends. We want you to convince 10 friends. And it was a kind of explosion. So it was very interesting. Here you had the Facebook. It was very interesting. Even Spain in the political is more Twitter. The Facebook, of course, it was important. There were many things happening. A fan page, a secret group of 2,000 people, not so secret, but so it was a very big secret group. And this is when I kind of doy mi cara por Manuela is change your profile picture and put a picture of the graphic designers and all of the crazy things that were going on. Well, this is about importance, so you will find the references of all of what is speaking, articles and links, and at the end of the presentation, maybe Levente you can share in Facebook after that, it's online. This is about the importance of territories, that because of the networked participation way of doing things. Here you see people with bikes, a kind of peer-to-peer movement of bikes with a lot of things in the whole city. They're speaking about the, here you have projectors of people projecting the face of the candidate. It was very funny because they found where the conservative leader was living and they projected in her house. So it was a kind of news in El País, in the main newspapers of Madrid. This action, thinking cleverly, how can we make this projection viral? And they projected in the house of the Conservative Party leader. So it was a kind of, wow, these people are with a lot of energy. This is, on the right you will see, because a lot of illustrators and graphic designers and a lot of comic people and writers and video makers and that they organize it in WhatsApp groups, Telegram groups, and you saw in the whole corners of Madrid, people doing posters and putting posters in the walls. So this way of organizing it, networks, digital ones, to think clever actions, concrete one, how to hack the enemy, these projections, this Tinder profile. This is very important. How can you get to the motion of that? For example, I remember, I am a journalist, I am a writer. In those times, for me, it was better, I was more useful, of course, helping them with the strategy in the networks. I had more or less that specialty, writing things, articles, as if I didn't know anything about the movement. Oh, look what fantastic candidature. So I was in the role of journalist, but of course, very inside the movement. I remember this Somos Manuela, We Are Manuela. I coordinated this trending topic campaign in Spain. It was trending topic 12 hours in Spain. It was a kind of crazy viral stuff. How hacking Twitter, Somos Manuela, hashtag 3 days before the elections. All of the media began to speak about. They couldn't help speaking about this new candidate without money, people doing things. So. And the pools began to be the equal, so the intention of votes was very growing. So this kind of emotional approach from networks, digital and physical, how to translate the emotion of what's happening. I remember a Facebook event. It was the Great Party of Democracy with that Spotify playlist. And it was a change, completely different way of doing things. I think the traditional party were a kind of with a program, boring things, with marketing sentences. And you saw that event, it was not a fake event. We knew there was not going to be a concrete event of the party, but it was a kind of the emotional place where people shared music, and there was an open collaborative Spotify list for the candidature. So it was important how this emotion, this try to be collective, try to think about future with affect, with emotion. It was very, very crucial. Well, we did it a book. I will show you now. This is crazy thing. This is Sara Colau from Barcelona, Manola Carmena. So there's a kind of thousand of creations that were created. After that, we edited the book, the both graphic liberation fronts from Madrid and Barcelona, and I was one of the community managers of the accounts, and I didn't know the 10% of the posters and things. It's incredible. I remember one day in my house, 2 other community managers came to my house with their computers of the campaign. We put everything together, and I didn't know half of every day. It was incredible how we didn't know. It was an explosion, so there were a lot of material. So we spent months looking for in the hashtags in many places, in WhatsApp. So after that, we did the book. It's called Finally, We Won the Elections between Madrid and Barcelona, with a bag, with a lot of things. And we made a kind of 12 test of how we organized the movements and how did we win the elections. It's in Spanish. It would be very interesting to be in English, but well, this is more the topography of the networks. I won't speak about that, but you see this one I made by myself. Look, this is very interesting. Look at the one. When you have a centralized network, you have a very important central node, big one. Here you have 2. Ahora Madrid, it's the official coalition. Madrid con Manuela, it was the graphic designers movement. So it's the second more important, more than Manuela, more the candidate is there. And the other ones, it's a completely decentralized peer-to-peer network. It's a small people with very few followers, 100, 200 followers, 300 followers, speaking between them. So you don't have many leaders. It was a kind of amazing thing. You don't see many influencers. It was people. I made an article, it's in the book, called The Confluencers. It's more important to be confluencer than an influencer because you put people in contact. And it was a very amazing thing what happened. So, well, here you have a map of the places where we have confluences. It was a map made by Barcelona in Comú. The movement is ruling 9 capitals in Spain, a kind of 80 cities, small ones, but it's not few. And well, now I prefer to speak before the lab and after Decide Madrid. And well, the MediaLab Prado is a very special place because it's a 15 years old hacker lab that it was initially it was a small lab. And it's an open space where you can go and do things from the open knowledge and the free software approach. So everything that is done there. And it's quite open for the citizens. So you can propose a talk and you propose a working group. And in the last 7 years, and mainly 6 years, it's a big thing. So MediaLab Prado, after working a lot with many communities and movements and hackers of the whole planet, mainly Europe and Latin America, and Madrid has a very close relationship with Latin America. And so a lot of labs and people in South America and Latin America, they had the MediaLab Prado Madrid as one of the main references. And well, in the last 7 years, it has a new big building in Madrid. It was a very big and beautiful place. And it is one of the places where the commons and the self-organization and the squatters and people began to think how we organize and how the commons and the city are important. And many projects of the city of Madrid were born there, but not official from the city hall. So it was people, academic. It's a place where you meet academic people, hackers, activism, institutions, city halls. And well, after this winning the city hall with Ahora Madrid, I got the proposal of be the director of communication of MediaLab, and with this participation project, because the new participation area of the City Hall of Madrid, some of the hackers that were occupying the squares, Pablo Soto mainly, he's the conciliar of participation of Madrid. He's a pretty well-known hacker, and he had the idea of, well, we want to do a platform and free software open platform with this bottom-up way of proposing things, but we need the lab. They wanted to have a lab for innovation, for citizen innovation, for kind of where you do different stuff around the platform. So MediaLab Prado does a lot of things about urban cities, feminism, free software, a lot, but in these 3 years, one of the key most important fields for working there is participation. So this Participa Lab is a lab inside MediaLab Prado that works a lot with the city hall, the city council of Madrid. The difference of working inside or outside is very important because in a lab, it's quite similar of what you had in the squares or what you had in the municipalist coalitions. And you have an outside, so you are not inside the government, you are kind of inside, outside, you are in the middle. It's very interesting to be there because you can prove and you can invent, make up things. And for example, we work mapping big data communities inside the city of Madrid. We do events and we invite people that are speaking about the same things in the platform to do a unique proposal and to create a group. For example, we made a fantastic mapping of alternative education and children. So we realized that the most important community inside the city of Madrid, it was children and public space and alternative education. And we invented a kind of event after mapping with big data, the communities. And it was the right to play frame. We put designers and people that were in those crazy things of Aura Madrid, of Madrid con Manuela. I created a transmedia group inside MediaLab Prado and helping communities and helping people for doing political proposals. So it's not enough to have, let's go through to the Decide Madrid. So this is I will speak more about the right to the play proposal. This is a quite simple free software platform. It's a bottom-up. You have the citizen proposal, that is, it's direct democracy. You have the participatory budgeting. You have process, a lot of debates and things happening online. You have crowd law. Yeah, we had different projects for crowd law, to crowdsource laws of the city. And the most important thing that was happening there, of course, 100 million euros for participatory budgeting is very big. So it's Paris and Madrid, the two cities with more money put in the hands of civil society. But the citizen proposals, the idea was fantastic. If you got 20,000 votes in the city, it's 1% of people who can vote in Madrid. It goes to the city hall, they vote, the councillors vote, and it wins because with the support of the Socialist Party, it's a kind of deal that Aura Madrid and the Socialist Party made for doing that possible. What they found is that it was not so easy. It's 400,000 people inside the city of Madrid. It's a lot of people. Instead, it's a platform with more users, the political platform with more users of the planet. But it's not enough. We found that there were many similar proposals, very similar with few votes. So it was a kind of, wow, we thought that they were going to do proposals and they were going to go to raise the proposals. And we found very similar proposals. So that is why we found this communitarian approach, big data for putting people, to bringing people together to territory, to MediaLab Prado, to meet him personally. We have hackathons for improving the platform. We do a lot of meetings with social movements. There's another moment in the participatory budgeting that you do meetings in the squares, in the different neighborhoods of Madrid. This storytelling narrative group that I coordinate. So in the MediaLab, in a citizen lab, you can do a lot of experiments. We have another project called Madrid Decide, that is completely physical. It's in a neighborhood of Madrid. It's a pilot project that I was coordinating for how to connect the digital and this platform with a lot of users and the daily life and the squares and the parks and people that maybe even in Madrid is more than 90% online. There are a lot of behaviors that are offline, and you meet people in the squares and you do proposals in a very different ways. So it was very interesting to see how, when you don't have a government inside, people organize themselves in the squares, in assemblies, in very different ways. And when you are inside, it's different. Because, for example, I remember one of the failures of this participation area, they asked MediaLab, why don't you help us to do a kind of debate in the squares about participatory budgeting? It was a kind of, we had 3 weeks, we said, it's impossible. It's not going to work. We are out. We don't want to help you because it's not going to work. We said them, it's not going to work. You are not activists. You are not saying, let's occupy the squares. And they did. They sent an email to these 400,000 people. They made banners. They put in the bus station. And they found 10 people in every square. It was a kind of, let's see, you are a government man. You have to do it in a different way. Maybe they don't want to speak in the squares about participatory budgeting. Maybe you have to have a different open space for what do you want to speak about. After that, I think that there's another new physical place of political decision making in Madrid is the local forums. Every district of the city, 21 district of Madrid, has a physical place as this to make meetings, collective decision making. So after that failure, I think that the participation area began to think, okay, we have to do more this. There was a new relationship with the digital and the physical and the local forums. So I think it's very difficult. I mean, we have been using the platform for consulting things as how do you want to change this square? And it was not enough because the traditional neighbors in associations, more analogical, were not used to be in the digital debate. The first time they made the public consult for a square, it was they had a lot of problems, a lot of social movements, they didn't want to participate. After that, they found different ways of doing physical encounters, meetings, the digital mixing. After that, they did a kind of 11 squares, one in every neighborhood. How do you want to reshape and to do a green space and So they were testing different ways of doing things. So the limits of the digital are quite clear. You have the potential in concrete things. You can go and rise and have a very important proposal. In the micropolitics, in the small, maybe it's not so useful, or it's useful after a lot of physical debate and encounters, and you have to do it in the different ways. Maybe, for example, MediaLab Prado is in the center of Madrid. And we saw that a lot of people, Madrid is big, so their life is there, is far away from the center. They didn't come to MediaLab. So we began to do this Experimenta Distrito. Experiment in your district is a project we have been doing in 5 districts for doing collaborative projects for the neighborhoods, and with open call for projects. You put in the same project people that they don't know. Maybe you have 2 people, friends, but so it's doing things with people you don't know of your neighborhood. And after a lot of months of work with public support, with resources, facilitation, mediation, you create projects that they live and they go or to public policy, or they go to a new movement, or they are real projects for improving neighborhoods. So I think it's very complex how to mix the physical and the digital. I think that's why I will go back to this test. Is fantastic. The path to the real world. The real world TM is just another layer, but out of all the interfaces, it's the one with most users, more bandwidth, better graphics, and it's the only one in which you can have a beer. So this is a test that quite digital activists made. The 15N, Indignados, Partido. So he was quite critical after years of being online. And he said, okay, the real world is the place where you can drink a beer. And the contrary, this test is very nice. You can see it at the end. He was explaining how there was a day of repression in Barcelona, where the police hitting people, and it was a kind of a scandal. So one day after that, with a lot of digital and YouTube and Twitter and blogs, he went to buy bread, and he listened to all women speaking about that, and TV was not showing that. And it was because the one of the family was seeing YouTube. So he said, well, maybe YouTube is a place where, so how to connect that? So maybe the internet is the place to hack reality too. So it was a kind of a grandmother with a 10-year-old girl speaking about that, because she was seeing in YouTube. So it's complex, and I think that every day to stay at the digital level is more problematic. Well, here you have the references. Maybe we can speak about this. But I am in these times. I'm seeing that the networks that during the Indignados movement, the 15M movement, were fantastic. The Twitter and the Facebook. Now you have a lot of bots and trolls and noise and fake news, and it's not beginning to be a nice place to be if you don't have this free software, public platforms, but you have secure without surveillance networks and physical encounters. So I think we are in a very different moment. I don't know exactly what's happening in Hungary, but the networks are the same, so we have the same problems, the digital ones, the Facebook and the surveillance and those stuff. Twitter is not what it was, so because the far right-wing people learned how to use it, and you see Bolsonaro and Trump, and so it's a very different moment, I think, and even for participation. So if you want, we can speak about it now and open for questions. But well, I want you to remember these 3 points of what's happening, because a lot of people is speaking about what's happening in Madrid and Barcelona. The digital tools is amazing, fantastic, it's okay. But you have to remember that a very concrete situation of occupation of the squares, grassroots autonomy, hackers, anarchists, self-organization, squads. So it's not by chance. So there's decades of previous work, a very strong social movement, a very strong civil society. So it's not by chance. And if you put, for example, in a place where you don't have participation, you have a top-down government, and it's forbidden to do everything, and you put just a digital platform, baby, people has fear and they don't want to participate. It is not going to work. So maybe it's good to think about that, how to, the concrete situation, how to hack and how to find these narratives and these symbols that, for example, in Madrid was found. So I think every place is different, and the moment is different. It won't be nice if I say you have to do the same. No, it's stupid, because 4 years ago, it was a concrete situation in Spain with a concrete moment. I think it's very different what's happening now. So, but maybe at my last sentence, the mix of different methods, the mix of different ways of doing things, the mix of different ways of participating, both in the territory, both in the digital, mixing both always. The different counter-power mechanism. If you, for example, you are working with sortition and democracy now, but if you only use that sortition as a way of new democracy, it will be a dictatorship. If you don't have a 10 mechanism mixing, and every one of them is a kind of counter-power, direct democracy, it's a nice idea. But maybe in Italy with Salvini, it will be a fascist proposal, direct democracy, fascist proposal for putting migrants out of the country. So if you don't have counter-powers mechanism and human rights and a kind of filters, direct democracy can't be a good idea. In the Brazil of Bolsonaro, I can say you that I am half Brazilian, it's not a nice idea, right, democracy now. It will be terrible. It will be, so how to combine, how to mix, how to do these collective filters with human rights and common sense for avoiding dystopy. So, well, I think...
Thanks a lot. We had a lot of information. I think it's very inspiring.
I speak too much, sorry.
No. I think it's great, and I'm sure we will have a lot of questions. I also want to remind you that please take some notes, make your connections with this whole topic on your post-its, and in the end, we collect everything. We might not have the time to really discuss all of them, but we had some questions. I would start with Laura. The first row. Yeah, it's very much close to what he was saying, because he was asking the question at the end that I wanted to ask, basically, because I start with limits. But I was taken into your very nice presentation, and thank you for it, because it was very energizing, I think. It also moves the discussion to a level of creativity, and it gives you the spirit of doing things, yeah? And it's also
a point of the motivation behind it. You had a momentum because of the election. You may have a motivation because of oppositional, oppositional towards certain aspects of dictatorships that we see growing and so on. But how do you, what's your experience being within this movement for such a long time? How do you transform this kind of motivation, or how do you keep it? And how do you transform this kind of motivation in proposition?
Well, it's a nice question. It's very difficult. I think the moment, for example, in Spain, with a kind of clash with Catalonia, new nationalism, a new small but far-right party coming, and disillusion of this movement that a lot of people expected all. We will win the city halls, the two main cities of the country, Madrid and Barcelona. We will rule as you have limits in money, in laws. The most important laws of housing are from the state and the regions, not about the cities. So I think the moment in Spain is not good. It's not good. We have elections in May. It's possible to win Madrid and Barcelona again, with a lot of internal fights, and it's not so exciting as it was. People are coming back to social movements. That's interesting, because the first 2 years, okay, when you have your friends in the city hall, all of the social movements and activists, after a lot of fights and squares and it was difficult, you relax. You kind of you stay 1 year and even 2 years. Okay, my friends are doing things, so I can rest a little. After that, a lot of people went inside the city hall doing projects, social movements. We saw that thousands of people had a new contract with city hall advisors, and you saw the streets and the protests with few people. So it was a kind of, wow, what's happening? And after that, many of them came back to the social movements again. Now the housing and the right to the city is again a very important matter. It's getting very difficult, and people are coming back. So maybe the energy and the illusion and the imaginaries, it's always a kind of dialogue between the inside, the outside, and you can never lose the streets. You can never, your foot has to be there, even when you are inside. For example, Ada Colau, the mayor of Barcelona, I interviewed her because 2 years ago, I went to Barcelona to interview her, and she has a kind of, don't forget where we come from. So it's, don't forget we come from the fights, for the resistance, and that's very, very difficult to be government, to be inside government, and to listen to people in a different way, to be in when you are a political leader and you go to the protest, do you put at the front? Or it's interesting how these new politicians of Spain, new politics, municipalities, they are clever. Because they are part of the social movement. So they don't put with media, with TV in the front of the protest. They are by themselves. You see a very important political leader between people, not without media, and so that's very important. But I don't know. It's a good question, but I don't have the only answer, of course.
I have one question, and in the same time I would like to ask you to prepare your questions. Magyarul is fel lehet tenni a kérdéseket. It was very inspiring to see how you talked about designer collectives and hackers, and all kinds of collectives that work with technology, with design, with Spotify lists and the Tinder account and all this stuff. And these are all people who come from very different backgrounds, have very different skills, speak very different languages. How was this networking possible? Because this is also what leads to, in the end, platforms or digital technologies that are actually not top down, not designed by one company and then it works or not, which we see actually in a lot of many cases, platforms that don't really work, they don't really fit to anybody's needs. But this was created by a lot of people who were active and who actually had the know-how. So how was this networking between these different universes possible?
Well, it's very important to say it was not so spontaneous at the beginning. So how do you create an overflow? How do you create a collective tide, a collective movement, and you lose the control. How to lose control? Before losing control of these things that happened without planning, you have to create an initial frame, positive one, inclusive. You have to find these narratives for the people. And after creating the initial posters and creations and the first music, well, the both movements that were created, the graphic liberation front of Madrid and Barcelona, it was people that were inside the municipalist movement. So it was again, how can we create a new movement with a lot of independence? Because they felt that in the official campaign, they couldn't do the official things. They didn't want to do that. It was a kind of, okay, not so top-down, but it was an official campaign. So they created these both graphic liberation front. I'm part of the Madrid one, but we have a common chat in Telegram. And after thinking a lot, how to open imagination, how to open imaginary, how to create these disruptive things. Maybe can I put a video on YouTube? Just very short. It's okay. So I think that you first have to think, what do we have in common? Budapest. We have a new elections now. What do we have in common? What's most important? Take back the city. Maybe green parks, participation in neighborhoods. And after that, I think that you have to think. You have to think. What's the frame? In Spain, it was take back the city, some ideas. And in the case of Madrid, the illusion of Manuela, an old woman that fought against dictatorship, against Franco. Let me put one thing.
I think one of the key issues is really how to get on board people who don't feel any connection to politics. I mean, you talked about again all the people who make a campaign attractive, for the people who are, speak the language of design, of technology, and I think these are completely disconnected spheres. Do you have any experience of this? Do you have any impression that you know about people who would be ready to give their know-how, but maybe they're not connected, they're not part of this discussion? Do you have any of this in Budapest? Any questions? Because a lot of people are interested actually in the digital dimension as well. There's a question over there.
Nekem most az jutott eszembe, hogy a ligetvédőknek elég sokáig kitartottak, és elég sokáig tudtak mozgatni embereket, és több olyan Facebook csoportot is használtak, amikkel tudtak hívni aktuálisan akciókra embereket. Most viszont történt a múlt héten egy komoly fakivágás elkezdődött, és a riadólánc nem működött. Hogy mi az, amivel fent lehet tartani az érdeklődést, hogyan lehet segíteni azt, hogy ne laposodjon el, hogy az emberek évek múlva is tudják, fontosnak tartsák azt, hogy cselekedni kell, amikor baj van.
It's a question to you, Bernardo.
Well, the long-term participation, I think that it's very interesting, the resistance process, maybe in a park. I was, for example, in Turkey after the Gezi Park movement, and I worked a lot with them. The resistance is always interesting to create a collective action. The most difficult and the most interesting is when you resist and you create a new world. So you are, for example, the Gezi Park in Turkey, in Istanbul, it was a resistance against the eviction of the park and they build a new building, and they were building a new world with assemblies, with card people, with feminism, with a new rule, digital tools. So when you are yes and no at the same time, when you are resisting and you are creating, some moments of the planet you see that. And for example, the Indignados movement 15M that had a very urban approach in many cases of reinvent the public space, but not just as a resistance to save a park, for example. It was, I think that potential is there. When you were sitting in the park, when you are resisting in a park, and you are building things and creating meetings and cultural stuff and urban gardens and assemblies, and you are resisting, but with your wall put in there. I don't know if I answered, but I think that it's interesting.
And I think the question is, somehow you have to make this whole process attractive, and it has to remain attractive, and it has to, people have to see their own visions, their own interest in it. And for me, it's quite fascinating to see that, I mean, there are entire fields that need to be more politicized, like technology, like, I mean, there's a lot of people who work with transparency, but it's not really connected to the people who really are experts on technology. There's another question over there.
Yes, I guess the elephant in the room that we are talking about is young people, right? So this is why most of us sit here, because if you would go to the assembly of your big panel house, like a huge house in Hungary, and you would go there, you would just see, I mean, we've all been to such environments where there are people, only those people are interested in what's going to happen with the house, who have been living there for long. They really have roots in the community, and they are most of the time already have children or grandchildren. And the reason why this is really interesting is because it's an online platform, and we think that maybe this is the tool to actually catch this kind of young people who are creative, who can create artwork, who can use Tinder, who can use Telegram, which is, again, I don't think that many of us have heard about it before. It's a you know, anyway, I shouldn't talk about it. Anyway, so this is kind of the main interest of us, that, wow, so in Spain you can actually mobilize young people, and then you see the amount of energy which comes out of this.
Well, the Spanish case is quite peculiar, because the 15M was a mix, of course, of a lot of young people, but at the same time of old people, of different generations. So it had the ability of putting in the same place very different knowledge and different approaches. For example, for the last municipalist campaign, there were a lot of young people, yes, but you found a lot of old people too. In this new municipalist moment of Spain, I went to one of the assemblies 3 weeks ago, and I found few young people, and I felt a kind of, wow, what's happening? But I saw a lot of 50, 60, 70 years old people, so I don't know if the young were in the digital or anything, something's happening that I don't know what it's in Spain now. So you are right, but I think that the ability of putting different knowledge and generations in the same place was very important in the Indignados movement and the municipalist movement, and I don't know what's happening now. So I maybe it's not working anymore. But well.
You also mentioned the importance of physical places to, you know, complement digital spaces. You mentioned the MediaLab Prado, which is a place also where you can walk in. You can sit down, there's open Wi-Fi, you can spend the whole day working. It can actually become your office, your meeting place. Nobody will really ask, what are you doing there? So it's, you know, this kind of open infrastructures where somehow, you know, you can start discussions, you can bring people together. We heard it's a very key issue. But what are exactly, how is it conceived? How did you conceive the MediaLab Prado on the one hand as a place for participation? And you mentioned is the neighborhood labs, no? That are also the local forums, no? That also serve as, you know, spaces for participation. So what are the characteristics of a place like this? What do they have to make available?
Well, for that I have to speak about the social centers first. So the squads that in Italy and Spain are called social centers. So it's a change of name of, we are not just squatters. This is a social center for the neighborhood. So it began in the 90s, this different approach from autonomy. Italy was at the beginning of the 90s. Spain from the 96, 7, the way a lot of people from Spain went to Italy and they saw that they were mixing free hackers, free software and squat. and they brought the idea to Spain. I think that both countries are the only ones that mix well hackers, free culture, and social centers. And Spain, I think maybe now has more social centers with this approach. In Madrid, we have 50 squads called social centers. Then the new thing is that, well, these social centers are very important with free Wi-Fi, with spaces to do things in the neighborhoods. So the MediaLab was always linked to the people of the squads, at the beginning mainly. And it was, as a public place, a different place because it's a public place. But this open space that is quite famous in the hacker meetings of the planet, the open space that you sit in a place where anyone is welcome and can speak about anything. And on the digital, you have open space rooms in chats and so. But of course, when it's a public place, it's different because you have projects and you have things, but you always have in MediaLab maybe it's the 30% of the building that is very big. Levente knows MediaLab is big. It's 2 buildings together with, so maybe 30 or 40% is open and free for people. So, of course, finally you create communities, or you incentivize to create communities. Kind of 7 years ago, one of the users that was one of the thinkers of MediaLab said, well, MediaLab is a kind of incubator of communities. So this is not a startup incubator, it's an incubator of communities. I think it's a nice definition. And the social forum is a kind of how to, because for example, Madrid has a lot of infrastructure of buildings in the neighborhood that were not being used at all, or a little bit, but you could do things there. So they didn't have to build new buildings for the social forum, for the local forums. It was a kind of, okay, this big space every 2 weeks is a social forum, and that room too. So every neighborhood has a social forum, the kind of frame, and you can use it, and there are official meetings, and you can speak about the participatory budgeting every month. But they didn't build because there are a lot of buildings, public buildings in the city, so they kind of reuse that. So this connection of social centers and MediaLab as a kind of different between social centers and local forums. For example, you have the official ones, the local forums, the city hall. You have the squads, so the social centers used by people, movements, grassroots people. And you have MediaLab in the middle, kind of. And you know that in front of MediaLab, we have the biggest squad in Madrid. It's Ingobernable. It's a social center with cinema, parties, hackerspace, feminist. The feminist strike of Spain that stopped the country last year and will stop again this was cooked inside the social center. So in Ingobernable, every important person that comes to MediaLab or to Madrid, Angela Davis, Nancy Fraser, David Harvey, all of them go to Ingobernable. Maybe they come to...
And not to MediaLab Prado.
No, maybe they come to MediaLab and we do a beer, a coffee, a new talk with people in Ingobernable. So this bridge between social center and MediaLab is very interesting, how people that come to MediaLab always go to Ingobernable, and the contrary. So it's interesting. And of course, a lot of media, they call me because I am the responsible of communication. Hey, I see that David Harvey is in the squad. You are paying that with public money. No, man. So it's always a kind of crucial point for right-wing media. They whole day funny to me. So you are paying that. You are in the squad. Oh, stop it. I just want to put this 30-second video. It's very short. There was a debate, official debate in the TV between the candidates of the right wing, the Manuela Carmena, and the right-wing conservative candidate was very impolite and didn't stop every time that Manuela was trying to speak.
Sorry, do we need sound for this?
Yes, maybe.
Can we have? But we don't have the.
Well, it's not so important, but maybe with the microphone. It's a remix that a person made that was a kind of viral. So this is the right wing. This is Manuela, speaking. Why don't recognize and you see the other shouting and stopping and. So so it's a very simple way of doing a remix, and it, well, you see, at the moment it was, how many people saw this? 28,000. As this video, you have thousands of videos. So it was interesting how to use humor and sense of humor for against the enemy. It was a kind of be funny. You have to do a funny revolution.
You have a question over there?
Who's organizing this? Who's coordinating? How's the hierarchy built up? Who decides? Okay, this is like, I guess, some guerrilla video. Who decides what goes on social media and what happens in the social lab? What programs are engaging the people? You know, what's the whole story?
That was a person, independent, and it went viral.
Sorry, I mean, like, I guess this video was just some, exactly, but overall, the whole story, the whole...
You're speaking about the campaign? Or?
Yeah, most.
Well, in the campaign, you have the official one, that it was a good campaign. So, different one, not top-down, with the different actions, and speaking. For example, the candidate went to the whole neighborhood. She said, I don't want to do a political meeting. I want to listen to people. So, it was a kind of the political here and people speaking their problems. So it was a different campaign. Videos, so it was a nice, but it was not enough. What we were speaking about, the overflow, how do you create the initial, how do you say, meteorite, or the first punch of the campaign for people getting the illusion? It was the creation of these two movements, of the Liberation Graphic Front of Madrid and Barcelona. It was a trial to, okay, let's do in a different way. Let's engage designers, let's engage video makers, let's engage people. And after this illusion and these funny things that we're doing, a lot of people, this person that made the video of Chuck Norris, made it because she saw a lot of things happening. And she's a video maker, I know her. And she did it. And put the hashtag of the Somos Manuela, and hundreds of people saw it, had fun, and went viral. Of course, she was part of this community, of these 100 or 1,000 of people. Maybe she was one of the most 100 active people in the independent campaign, but she did what it was possible, videos. She knew to do videos, so she made a kind of 4 or 5 videos for the campaign. Some worked, some no, but it was connected to a collective emotion. A collective emotion of that moment, a collective way of doing things. It was connected to an illusion. So if you see the whole things happening, but for example, your question is good. The official campaign, they didn't know nothing what was happening out of the campaign. I created a group for connecting both, mainly for saying to the official campaign, don't do nothing on this. For example, several trending topics in Twitter were made from the outside, from the citizenship. And I remember that I told the official campaign, stop, don't tweet, wait 4 or 5 hours. When it's on the top with a lot of people, okay, just put a tweet, but it's the people doing that. So that's a very important difference with official campaigns that, for example, rule in Madrid, Barcelona, the 9 capitals of Spain, they do collective campaigns for divulgating facts and things, but it's official. You see the accounts. You see that they are doing the campaign. So in that case, it worked, and it's better to be a citizen-driven campaign than an official one, even that the coalition was independent, citizen-driven, okay? So in that concrete case, it was quite autonomous. So there was no control. But before losing control, you have to have that. The frame, the narratives, the emotion, and more or less to do the first step. If not, you can lose the control the first day and it won't work. So it's very difficult to choose when you lose control of something. It can be good, but maybe not. I don't know if I have answered your question, but...
We have time for 2 more questions. 1, 3. 1, 2, 3.
Én azt szeretném megkérdezni, hogy a bizalmat hogyan lehet megőrizni, mert az emberek hajlandók esetleg aktivizmusra, de már rossz tapasztalatokkal rendelkeznek, hogy őket csak felhasználják, vagy kihasználják. Szóval ez a kérdéskör, ami engem érdekelne.
How can you keep trust? Because people are afraid that they are being instrumentalized.
Sorry, I didn't hear because it was...
That's fine. So how can you maintain trust in people? Because a lot of people are really afraid that they would be instrumentalized, they would be abused.
Well, that I will respond from my Brazilian side. I've spent half of my life in Brazil. I have both nationalities. And for example, in Brazil, I was in 2013 quite inside the social movements of the right to the city, the Passe Livre. And the main issue that didn't work in Brazil was the trust. People didn't trust each other. Social movement didn't trust other cities' movement. There was a kind of manipulation both from the traditional left, trying to copt, both from right-wing media and parties. We made different meetings in São Paulo with different movements of the whole country. And it was very difficult to recognize yourself in the same fight. So it was very strange for me. I remember that was a meeting in São Paulo, to have a lot of movements quite linked to right to the city, to a concrete explosion of social movements, as the June protests of 2013. And this lack of trust, I think it was very, very difficult. So the main problems of that it was the traditional left and the right-wing traditional parties, the media. And even in those times, there were a lot of governments from the traditional left in Brazil, from PT, the Labour Party. They lost the trust because this trial of cooptation of social movements. So in the case of these new politics and municipalism, I think it's been different because of the tools you use with free software, accountability, transparency. It helps. I think it helps. It's not enough. I think it's very important, the attitude of politicians, the way they listen, the way they go to places, the format, the shape of the meetings they do. For example, you see several new politicians that they are behaving as a kind of old politics. They do a rally with pictures of media. And you say, wow, man, you are doing the same thing. So why are you doing that? Most of them are not doing that. I think it's an interesting what's happening. And I think it's another way of listening. For example, the Pablo Soto, that is the chief of participation in Madrid. He is a person that I think that he knows to listen. He go because he's in a chair, so he's a different person. And he goes to the places and he listens. He doesn't speak so much, just at the end. And I think that's a nice attitude. The politician has to listen first. And if you go to a place and speak a lot and you don't listen, but for example, this person and other ones are doing that. They go to a place, no, I want to listen. So you all speak, and at the end I can add things. So I think it's very important that to keep this trust.
Köszönöm szépen. Két dolgot szeretnék mondani. Az egyik, vagyis kérdezni először, hogy van-e esetleg valami menetrendje annak, vagy leírt gyakorlata, hogy hogyan lehet létrehozni egy ilyen szomszédsági közösséget, vagy hogyan lehet ezt segíteni. Nyilván itt, hogyha már sok létrejött, akkor feltételezem, hogy valami jó gyakorlat kialakult, ami esetleg leszűrődött, és mi is hozzáférhetünk, mert szerintem ez nagyon sok mozgalomnak itt Magyarországon, egyébként civil szervezetnek probléma, hogy szeretnének ilyeneket létrehozni. A másik csak egy gyors, vagy előbb... Igen?
Do you need me?
Yes, I missed a kind of 30 seconds in the middle. How to build communities.
Well, what is the scenario? What is the work plan to create actually neighborhood community? in 1 minute.
I think that no one has a concrete response, or there are many. It depends a lot on the neighborhood. It depends a lot on the diversity of the neighborhood. It depends a lot on the public policy of the green spaces, of the tradition, of the social traditions of people. So maybe if I give you a kind of receipt, you have to do it that way, it won't work here. For example, I live in Madrid in a neighborhood with more than 100 nationalities, people from the whole planet. It's a quite traditional anarchist place with self-organization for centuries. So I have to how to do it in Lavapiés in Madrid, but maybe it's not going to work here. In Spain, it's quite tolerant with migrants, no problem with that. So it depends. It depends. I think to have, just in a kind of general response, to have spaces in an open space, so in a public space, it's not so easy to build a community inside a building. So I think you have to have common spaces with daily life, where people go with the dog, with the friends, to play football. So when you find a place where people, maybe it's a market, maybe it's another place, I think you have to have a common place for the people, and that you can do your daily life in the place. So maybe after mapping and doing which is the place where people are, you have to use, of course, buildings, official centers, different strategies for engaging people. And I think that is very important to do things, practical things. So by the practice, by doing, community by doing, not just by thinking, how could I create a community? Man, you have to build a wall, you have to be a basket place for so do it. And when you do it with others, when you do it and you have open places and open methods and assemblies, and more or less everyone can speak and say, I think that if you have a leader, a quite top-down place, the architect is the guru of the architecture, you won't get a community. When everyone can put an idea and can help, because any one of us can learn from each other. I can teach you how to write a book, and I can learn from you many things. So it's important to say that. So together we can learn from each other. So when you have the common space, this open method, this knowledge of we can learn each other, and together we are more powerful, I think you get that community. And you have to find the crucial and important things for people. Maybe when you're a government, okay, let's do a park and we want to do a kind of talk about diversity, but what they are worried about is green spaces. So I think you have to listen a lot, So you won't create a community from that. And well, resistance, as I told before, is another moment. Of course, in the resistance process, you create communities.
Igen.
Second part.
A másik csak egy rövid, ami talán itt sokakat érdekelhet, hogy amiről szó volt itt a Decidim rendszer, azt az demokrácia műhely pont most Magyarországra, vagyis magyar nyelvre lefordította, és elérhető lesz hétfőtől a d.edemokracia.hu honlapon. Úgyhogy ezt érdemes lesz majd megnézni és használni.
I would like to ask that, do you think that this kind of strategies, campaign strategies could be used also, not just at the elections, but in some exact cases? For example, in some city development case. I'm asking this because now I think it would be difficult to win the elections for a left party or green party, and maybe with just some good goal, more people could be involved maybe than at the elections. And yeah.
Well, I think if you think just in election, you will lose always. If you think that, well, we want to win, but if you think about communities and the real issues that people are worried about, and you create long-term spaces and communities and movements, and you find a way of connecting resistance. Okay, we have 3 resistant cases. We have a new proposal, organic one, cargonomy. You have how to connect housing movement and diversity and migrants, and you find common events and meetings, and after that you create a movement for the city and long term, and one day you have elections. If you don't have, well, it's impossible to win Madrid and Barcelona without that. So you never will win a capital or Lisbon, or you have to have a previous resistance movement, communities, and there's one day, of course, that, wow, why don't we present a kind of independent, but I think it's very important. If not, well, you can do it, but it's difficult, maybe in a concrete moment of decadence of the system, and the main parties are almost dead, and someone, well, okay, but I think you have to think about this organic way of organizing neighborhoods, and to think, and I think you have to see the opportunity. There's one day, there's one moment that you see, wow, everything's falling apart, my friend. If we don't do anything, there will be a kind of far right or opportunists coming. So I think you have to have this sense of opportunity. This is our time, our times. Our times are now, and we have to organize. And I think most of the cases that we are here in Budapest found the moment of, okay, we have to organize now, and we can do it, we can do something. So I don't know if you are going to win or not, but maybe it's not the moment, or maybe it's the moment for do a first trial to organize people, and in a few years they will do it.
I think this is a great message for the end. Thank you very much, Bernardo, for sharing us. You will be with us, so you can always, pose your question privately. So thanks a lot. A little applause to
Thanks
Bernardo,
to you.
please.